Well, hello there, and welcome to episode 3 of the Grazer Mower Revival. The last episode was a complete flipping disaster. Nothing worked out well. Stuff did not go how I wanted, and I actually just got done filming all that. So in this episode, the goal is to get the body on and start routing the wiring harness and getting everything there set up. So I'm going to go ahead and get the magic paper out. That's going to give us kind of the analyzation of how the body goes on. We'll take a look at that, and then we'll actually get something done. All right, now, I know what you're thinking, and I can explain, I promise, okay? So, the body's over there. Here's the deal. I had footage already done. I had the body on. I had the harness routed. I had, the drive belt on. The arm was on. Everything was going good. I had to replace this return line to that hydrostatic motor. But yeah, I had all that done. All this was together. All of it was hooked up. All of it, well, the important stuff was working. Had to put a solenoid on. It's over there. And we'll go over this in detail later, I promise. But I had all that done. So then I go to hook up the clutch because I'm like, well, if I can turn the key on and it's getting power, it should, just like an air conditioning compressor clutch, if you turn the key on in your car, or at least in my pickup, you should be able to hear it click and it should, engage. If you just turn the key on, it's got power and you switch to air conditioning. And I figured, well, same thing with this PTO clutch. If it's got power, I turn the key on, I turn the PTO switch on, it should click into place, and then I can verify that it's at least doing that, and I can move on. So I get to... It's raining. Anyway, I get to that point, and I'm over here looking at the wiring diagram. I'm like, okay, here's the PTO. What wires do we have? All right, so we got 2 black wires. One of them goes up here to the engine. The other one goes over to this circuit breaker. And then that black and yellow wire goes all the way up here to the PTO switch. So I'm like, okay, where's the circuit breaker? So I start looking. Can't find the circuit breaker. Can't find the circuit breaker. And I can't find it. So I take the front cover off. Well, because I thought, well, maybe they put it under there. They didn't put it under there. It doesn't have one. So either some yahoo at the factory screwed up, or some yahoo that had this mower before us foobarred the clutch, which those went to the circuit breaker. So I'm pretty sure they messed with something, and that was not us. So they screwed up the clutch once or something, or they messed up the circuit breaker and they decided to delete it, which is a bad idea. And then they managed to jury-rig the clutch so it ran. I don't know. And then when we got it, the clutch quit because the wires broke off. And so here we sit. No circuit breaker. That's important in an electrical circuit. Now, the clutch, the wires going to the clutch don't have to be big because all they're doing is holding the magnetic... Or, sorry, let me explain this right. All it's doing is magnetizing it so that it holds the clutch plate, to the drive plate on it, so that it actually turns with the motor. All it's doing is holding it in place. It's just like an air conditioning compressor clutch. It doesn't need that much power, all right? But, if you get into something heavy and that engine lugs down and your power load drops, it's going to create strain on it, and you want something in there to help protect your electrical circuit. If your amperage drops or your wires start getting hot or something like that, you want to be able to protect that. So, yeah, that was not here. I don't know if that's why the original one failed or not, but, it doesn't matter. It's not there. So, again, waiting on parts. I should have a circuit breaker, a battery, a couple of spark plugs, because I'm going to go ahead and do spark plugs since I had to take the engine out again, essentially. And then I ordered a couple more inner tubes for that tire because I can't seem to put a tube in a tire right, even though that one never gave me any problems and the tail wheel never gave me any problems other than getting them on. For some reason, that tire, I can't keep a tube in it and get it to hold air. It's weird. So all that's happening. And yeah, it's really frustrating because well, what's that song? One step forward and two steps back. Yeah, I had all this on. I had it all wired up, and I was going to go over it. And when I started doing that, that's when I realized there was no circuit breaker. And that's important because I want everything to work correctly and properly. And it could be that the engine has to be running for the clutch to engage anyway. I don't know. But there's no way for me to tell because that's the battery I was using. I'm pretty sure that's a 6-volt battery. This is a 12-volt system. So I'm supposed to be getting a battery too today or tomorrow. And then I'll have that. We can make it work. So, very frustrating. So yes, in the first 5 minutes, all I've managed to do is go backwards. So yeah, that's what I'm dealing with. So in the next segment, we'll actually make some real progress, I promise. All right, we're ready to put the body on now. I've got plugs in it. The spark plug they tell you to use is Champion RC12YC. They tell you to gap that to 30 thousandths of an inch is the gap. So got that done. Got the wiring kind of tucked back in and ready. So now we could put the body back on. But I'm not going to film it again because I've got all this old footage. I'm going to try and use some of it. So while I'm putting the body on, you guys can watch me put it on the first time. And then when that's done, we'll come back and talk about the wiring harness. All right. That should give you guys a pretty good view. Let's see if I can drag that thing over here without making a mess. Oh, so professional. Oh. Hope we didn't pinch anything important. Well. So far, so good. Yeah, that's not bad. I think we can live with that. All right, so the next step is to get these bushings separated and get them installed. Kind of hold the body in place. That'll take a little maneuvering. And I will say that having an inflated rear tire really makes this thing move a lot easier. And that wasn't too bad. It doesn't look like we pinched any important wires or cables. We don't need that box there anymore. Yeah, it's not looking too terrible. We'll just have to get everything kind of routed back underneath. But for now, let's make sure that the body is securely attached to the base assembly. All right, well, at the risk of another awkward moment, we're going to try and, well, I'm going to try and demonstrate how these are supposed to go on that corner. So, well, let's start out by losing my wrenches. Okay, 3/4, good. And why is the top a different size? That's dumb. Who did that? That says 7/8. That does not say 3/4. I'm the dummy, as usual. Okay. Alright, so we got 3 washers and 2 rubber bushings. And if I remember right, it should go rubber bushing, washer, and then is it... Oh, wait, no. I think it's 2 washers on the underside, and then one set on the top side. Okay, well that's... Oh, sorry, I'm trying to stay out of your guys' way, but it, there we go. Got it started. That, come here. That's kind of what we have to deal with for now until I get the rest of them in. Then I can cinch them up tight. So I don't think you guys really want to watch me do all these. So that's just kind of a general idea of what we're looking at. I'll get the rest of them installed and we'll see what it looks like. Well, they all went in pretty easy. Now let's get them tightened up. Got to get to the locking part of the lock nut. There we go. Oh, yeah. That's looking good. All right. Well, let's wheel around to the front one. Looks good to me. All right, body on, wiring harness is mostly done. So let's go ahead and talk about it. This is your wiring diagram. It's, you know, pretty easy to follow for a wiring diagram. We'll go ahead and talk about how everything's hooked up. I have not put the circuit breaker in yet. That's okay. So I don't know if I mentioned it or not, but one of the things I did have to replace was a solenoid. So you got a new solenoid on there. We'll start here. So your solenoid, the way they've got it set up on the old one, you've got a power in and a power out, and then the power out jumps over to one of these terminals, and then it has the yellow and red. Sorry, I had to think of colors for a minute. It's yellow with a red stripe. That goes onto the same terminal as a jumper wire, and then the yellow with black, which I assume is ground, goes on the other terminal. The blue, solid blue wire that comes out of the harness goes over to here, and then this one I just have as the jumper wire. It moves over. So that's how the solenoid is routed. Of course, going up the seat lid, you have the seat safety switch there, and then up here you have the neutral safety switch. Down there, parking brake switch. All of that is in this cluster. You've got a ground wire there that comes over to here with two more ground wires. You can't see all three of them, but they're all bolted to this one spot. This piece of conduit is the power wire for the starter and for the rest of the system. I covered it in conduit and I zip tied it to that engine mount or hoist mount or whatever you want to call it, just to keep it from being on top of the what do you call them, the linkage for the throttle and the choke. I didn't want it resting on there, and I also didn't want this wire unprotected just sitting there getting hot and vibrating. That'd wear through the insulation and cause electrical problems, which I don't want. Let's not have a repeat of the 2090V that's sitting outside, right? So the instrument cluster, if I get it there. All right, so the instrument cluster, dash panel, whatever you want to call it. These two that come over here, your throttle and your choke, one of them is a little bit shorter, and it goes on this side, okay, this is your choke, because it's a shorter one, and the throttle goes over here because that cable is just a little bit longer, and you'll be able to tell when you get all this done. So we have hour meter, amp meter, ignition switch, PTO switch, and light switch, which I didn't hook up, and I don't know that I'm going to. Your hour meter here, your hour meter, of course, red's positive, black is ground, and you've got these splits because they plug into other stuff. One of them plugs into the red here, which is for the oil switch, the oil sentry, pressure warning, whatever the hell it's called. Then the white goes into this green wire, and I guess that's your ground. Now your PTO switch here, you've got two connectors. You've got a connector with 2 sockets on it, and then you got one with 3 sockets. That's pretty self-explanatory. This bottom tang here on the switch is not used. The light switch, I'm not sure which is positive and which is negative. But that's okay. You can look at the wiring diagram and see that. I'm just giving you guys a little visual to see what they're actually referencing in the diagram. So as you can see, the ignition switch, the ground for the amp meter is this little orange jumper wire that comes to the ignition switch connector. And then this other orange one goes to the positive on the amp meter. So with all that done, oh, one other thing before I forget. The cables are held in place with these little Phillips-headed screws with nuts on the backside. I went ahead and reused them because there's nothing wrong with them. You know, see, they're just little Phillips screws. There's nothing wrong with them, so I went ahead and reused them. You could replace them with bolts if you wanted. I mean, it's just to hold the cables and the levers in there. So, one other thing while I'm in here. That's for the lights. Okay, down here, you've got this fuse holder, which I put a 20 amp fuse in. It had a 10 in it before, but it is a separate part of the harness. It's not the same as the circuit breaker. Circuit breaker is different, and I have a new one right there. It's even a Ford. That's how you know it's good. So yeah, the fuse holder is not the same as the circuit breaker. They are separate, and they are listed differently on the diagram. So the next thing, the PTO clutch, and we're going to figure out whether or not this works here in a second, but it lists 2 wires, and then it goes into this connector, which is, I assume that's what that block is. I don't know what else it would be. You got a black wire and a black wire. Now, one of those black wires goes into the main wiring harness over to the circuit breaker, which is where the black-yellow control wire that comes off the PTO switch ties in. The second black wire just goes over here to the engine somewhere, and I assume it's a ground. So that connector is right there. I mean, that's all it is. And I didn't really want to route the wiring like that, but I can't get that unplugged. So it's just going to stay like that. I'll zip tie it up so it's a little more secure. But yeah, it plugs into the clutch, and then it just plugs into this little connector dangling here by the starter. And that should be right. I'm going to get a battery in this here in a minute, and we're going to test the whole thing. But I want to get these wires here, which are a little worse for wear. These are the wires that go to the circuit breaker. So I'll put an end on this. I'll leave this one alone unless I have to change it to a spade, female spade connector. Otherwise, I'll just leave this one alone, put one on that end. And what I'm thinking, I'm not 100% sure if I'm going to do it or not, but what I'm thinking is I've got enough wire. I'm going to put a new piece of conduit on it, obviously. And then I think I'll zip tie it right here because this hole doesn't really go to anything. And it should be okay there. Shouldn't interfere with anything. It'll be insulated and taped up good. It should not bother anything. I think that's the best place for it. I don't know where the original circuit breaker was on this. I don't know what the heck was going on because, as I mentioned before, I'm pretty sure the circuit breaker was never on this mower when we got it. And that's part of the reason the other clutch quit and the wires broke off, is because probably they got too hot and then they got brittle, and you know how stuff is. So that should cover all the electrical. I really don't care if the lights work or not. I'm never going to mow at night. So if you do care about the lights, I'm sorry, but I don't. So that should pretty well cover the wiring harness. Now, couple of quick notes, and I mention this in most of the time when I'm doing wiring. If you need conduit, wire loom, split wire loom, Fleet Pride sells it in bulk. And you might think, well, who the hell needs a roll of 100 foot, a quarter inch or half inch or 5/8 wire loom? I don't need that much if I'm doing a project like this. Well, you'd be surprised how quickly you go through that stuff. And I mean, it's nice. This is the quarter inch and this is the half inch. I mean, it's the nice stiff professional stuff. And then for connectors, these Dorman, come on now, there's your part number, 90905. That's a 16 to 14 gauge. They're these nice little metal connectors, and they come with little pieces of shrink tubing. These are excellent for connectors in a harness, and you want to keep a low profile. I would recommend those. And they come in a couple different sizes. But if you're looking for connectors or split wire loom, that's where I would go to get them. Now, if you're looking to replace these, I have no clue what they're called. I'm still trying to find them. I'm pretty sure they're like a generic trailer connector or something like that. I've seen them on other stuff. I've seen them in that International 1586 that's sitting outside the shop here. I know that's what all those are, is these styles, just these generic molded ones. But I don't know what they're called. I don't know if they're a specific brand, if they're a type. I don't know. I don't know how to help you there. But you can just buy female spades and plug stuff in if you had to. It's not the end of the world, but not these. I hate those. So that's about it for wiring, I'm pretty sure. So I'm going to get the rest of this hooked up. I'll throw a battery in it, and we'll see how much of this is actually going to work. All right, we got our battery in and hooked up. We have our circuit breaker wire routed up there. Right, where's my finger? There it is. There's a circuit breaker. Small problem though. Nothing much. But PTO off. We turn the key on. Hear that? So it's off now. Now it's on. Because if I shut the key off with the PTO switch off, then it disengages the PTO, but on. So PTO is wired up backwards. I tried swapping the circuit breaker wires. No difference. So it's probably something else somewhere. I don't really care. It's not a big deal to switch the PTO around. But if PTO's off, I mean, it's still not cranking the best. The starter might be weak. It may need to be replaced. It might not have enough get up and go to do it. But everything's on and in neutral. And it does spin, hopefully enough to start. And then maybe after it runs a little bit, it'll go ahead and loosen up and be okay. But it is spinning. Excuse me. And the PTO does work. At least it's engaging. So that pretty much does it for this video. I mean, oh, no, it doesn't. I need to do a couple things for the body. There are 4 bolts that hold it on, but there's also this spring here they give you, and it hooks in here, and then it runs underneath to the lid for the fuel tank, and that's what's supposed to keep the lid up when you lift it up to put gas in it or whatever. But it doesn't work the best. I mean, it'll hold itself up here in the shop, but if I went outside and there was any wind, it would just push it down. So the spring is optional. Quite honestly, I'm probably just going to carry a rubber strap, and if I have to open the lid and look at it, I'll just use a strap to hold it and to make sure it's okay. So other than that, I mean, yeah, the seat lid's only held on by 2 bolts, and I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory. That rod is optional. I left it in because I think that's a good idea, but that is optional. I still need to put a cotter pin in the park brake linkage, and I believe that's just about it. I think I've covered everything else, hookup-wise, either in this video or in the previous video. So yeah, that should do it for this one. Got a battery hooked up, the clutch is engaging and disengaging, the belt's hooked up, the engine spins. I'll probably have to give it a little bit of help to get it started, have to put the charger on it. And in case I forgot to mention, this is a 12-volt system, so a 12-volt battery is required. This one came from O'Reilly. It's got 350 cranking amps, or is it 350 cold crank? I think it's 350 cold crank, but it seems a little sluggish, so I'm going to put the charger on it and make sure that it's okay. It's been sitting since February, and sometimes those batteries don't hold a charge if they're just sitting, you know, if they're not used, if they're brand new or whatever. So I'll make sure it's charged up. I have to bend the bolts back because when I removed the body, I caught one of those with the tail wheel and I bent it. So I'll have to bend that back, and then I'll put the battery hold down in. That's really important. And yeah, other than that, everything's looking really good. I blew a fuse in the little fuse holder, so I replaced it with a 30 amp. Yeah, I went from a 20 to a 30. And I've got a couple more. I got a couple 15s and I got a 40. So if I blow the 40 amp fuse, I probably should look into an issue, but that fuse may have been bad. It's kind of old. So yeah, everything's looking good. We should be kosher. That will do it for this video. That is the mess that is the body installation and, more importantly, the wiring. So in the next episode, we will get the fuel tank in and see if we can't do a test fire, because I'd like to drive this thing around before I go putting the deck on it, just to make sure it's driving okay and the hydrostats aren't going to leak and stuff like that. So tune in for that. Thank you guys for watching. I know this was a production as usual, but that's okay. That's just how it goes. So yeah, we'll just catch you in the next one.